but it's just giving yourself 5-10 minutes even of undistracted eating. I know that's really hard for people, but it's unbelievable the difference it makes when you notice the food in front of you, when you taste it, when you bring all your senses to the table. It makes such a huge difference in the way that your body responds to the food and also the satisfaction and pleasure you have from your meal. The multitasking thing is actually a myth because our brains can't do. We think we're, especially women, we think we're such good multitaskers, and on some level we probably are, but at the end of the day, it just makes you feel overwhelmed and not present with either things because our brain can't process both or all three things, whatever you're doing at one time.
Hey there, I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. What kind of things run through your head when you eat? Are you counting calories? Telling yourself you're having good or bad food? Rewarding a good day or maybe punishing a bad? Maybe it's a special meal that we've been looking forward to and enjoying with a loved one. We have all kinds of food noise running through our head, or at least I have a lot of food noise running through my head. And if you are not familiar with the term food noise or familiar with a food story, then you are going to feel so enlightened today. Elise Museles joins us today to break all of this down and more. We dig into food story, food noise, what happens when we are stressed, when we eat, and she gives us easy, applicable tools to rewrite the way we eat, think, and live. Now, let me tell you a bit about Elise. She is the author of the book Food Story, Rewrite the Way You Eat, Think, and Live. She is an attorney turned eating psychology and nutrition expert and has been featured in all kinds of major publications, including the New York Times bestselling book Gut Bliss, The Microbiome Solution, The Naughty Diet, and Real Fit Kitchen. She is also the host of Once Upon a Food Story podcast. I know you are really going to dig this. And if you have talked to me anytime in the last month or two, I have told you about this book. I mean, this has just been so impactful to me, and I know you are going to want to hear this conversation and go grab your own copy of the book when we're done. Now, before I bring on Elise, I want to remind you of my book, Your Worthy Body. This book is for women who want a different perspective on their body, their movement, their eating, and it uses exercise science and nutrition science all through a lens of faith to break some of the rules and messaging we have heard. This is not a diet book. This is not a how to lose a quick pound book. This is just a reevaluation of why we take care of ourselves. And spoiler alert, it's so we can do what we're called to do. But I get a lot more into that in the book. Okay, let's bring on Elise. Elise, we have had some technical difficulties, but I am so glad that we are here and able to chat today. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm excited to talk to you.
I don't know how I've never heard of you because I guess you are formerly known as Kale and Chocolate. I just can't believe that I've never come across you before, but I was sitting at my kitchen counter having lunch one time. And that's where I catch up on the news, which we're going to talk about that here in a second, I know. And I came across this article that was so profound, and it talked about food noise and our food story. And I just dug into that. And I think I sent you a DM on Instagram right after that. I was like, I am smitten. This is so fantastic. And it is such a wonderful compliment to a lot of the stuff that I talk about in my book. And I'm so excited to have this conversation because what I'm realizing is it's not just about the food and the nutrients and the movement. And, like we can't silo those things, and they're not separated. And there's so much integration that I don't think that we realize. And I really learned so much from your book, Food Story. So I'm really excited to dig into this. So the first thing I want to ask you is, where did the term food story come from?
Oh, that's so good that you asked that right now, because as you were speaking, I was like, I have to share the whole concept of food story, because what you were saying, that it's not just us and food and the nutrients that we're consuming, really relates to how I came up with food story. So when I first started seeing clients and working with people, and even, delving deeper into my own relationship with food, it was, I thought about food like, it was like us and food, like you were saying. And I would talk to clients and I'd ask them, so tell me, I was so excited to be going beyond the plate, beyond what they were just eating, and talking about mindset. So tell me about your relationship with food. And I would get these very like, whoa, I don't want to go there, or, oh my gosh, it's complicated. Or, if I was working with someone in person, I would see their shoulders shrug, and it was almost like a dead end. And so I knew that I had to come up with a different approach. And this was like 2013. Oprah was talking about story. Brene Brown, like her books were really becoming very popular. And so story was definitely in the collective, but nobody was really talking about food story. But I started thinking about it like, okay, we have this money story, we have a life story, we have, a love story or love stories. Of course we have a food story, and it starts from the moment we're born, our food story. So I just started like playing with that, the language of it, and then thinking about what is a food story. A food story is, all the messages that you've received over a lifetime, the meals you've eaten, the memories you've made, their villains, their different chapters, it just goes on and on and on, themes. And so it just stuck with me, and it made sense, and it felt way more dynamic than the you and food, which is what you were talking about, or you and nutrients. And so I would start talking to clients and say, tell me about your food story. I'm like, food story? I never really thought about food story. Do I have a food story? But, when we get into conversation, I'd ask them those questions. It was like this big, huge relief came over them, because they could tap back into the past. They could see that it was dynamic, and that there were all these things affecting how they related to food. And it wasn't just about them and food. And so for a lot of people, it helped release some of the stress and the shame and the guilt that they felt about their like health and eating challenges, because they could see that it wasn't just, it wasn't their fault, so to speak. And so that's how the term food story really came about. And it speaks to what you were talking about just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it really is so interrelated with everything. So I'm curious if you would mind sharing your own food story with my listeners.
Sure. Well, my food story is complicated, and I definitely can't get into all of it, but I'll share a couple pivotal moments that I think will really resonate with many of your listeners. And you'll have to tell me if this is like what resonated with you, since you read the book, and you'll know more of my food story. So I was born in Los Angeles, which I think says a lot, that I grew up in a culture.
That's so unfair of me, right? Because automatically I'm assuming of a lot of stuff, but
yeah, and they're probably all true. I mean, especially, I went in all girls like middle school and high school. And so it just played into all those messages. And, and so I grew up in LA, and my very first like memory that was pivotal in my food story happened when I was 9 years old. I went to a doctor, and the doctor, I begged my mom and the doctor to get my ears pierced. That was back in the day when people went to their doctors and got their ears pierced with the, that gun. Mm-hmm. And so the doctor said to me, there was like all this hush conversation, that if you lose 5 pounds, you can get your ears pierced. And, it's not like I had a health issue or anything, like it was probably like pre-puberty, like going through changes. But that, I didn't realize how impactful that moment was for me, because it really taught me that I needed to like control my food, that it didn't matter how I felt, it was all about like exercising more and eating less. And at the same time, my dad was going through his own struggles and he would lock the refrigerator up at night. And I know that sounds like, what? Like that sounds terrible, but it was all with good intentions. He would wake up in the morning and he had been sleep eating and he didn't feel good. He didn't feel good physically. He didn't feel good emotionally. So his solution was to put a bicycle lock around the refrigerator. So it had absolutely nothing to do with us. And it wasn't supposed to affect me, my brother, and my sister in any sort of way. But, you see something like that happening. And so he would say, you want anything before I lock up for the night? And he'd hand my mom the lock and key. So that was just like giving that message, even though it was very well intentioned and nothing to do with us. Like I said, just that food was best kept under lock and key and controlled. And so from there, I really, when you are thinking my stressful thoughts, your body releases all about finding and the perfect diet and have the perfect body, and so that it affects your digestion, your metabolism, of course, that's not your nutrient assimilation, but and that was like in a nutshell, kind of the underlying theme. It doesn't even matter what you're eating. And then, another pivotal moment that I share, whatever you're eating. I went to a fancy dinner that had taken 3 months to get reservations, and I was with my then boyfriend, who we had talked about getting married. And, I did my usual. I was playing with the food because it was creamy and saucy and not on my, I'm putting air quotes up, plan. And he, we had been together for a while and he broke up with me at the table. Like you could see that he was uncomfortable. He said, I can't watch this. And I can't, we talked about like getting married and having kids, and I'm not going to bring kids into this world with that, like you not enjoying yourself and being picky. And so the good news is he's now my husband. But what was so pivotal for me was that it was the first time that I realized that all these my internal dialogue and my thoughts, which I wasn't sharing with him, were affecting him. That your food story, you're born into a food story. Other people affect your food story. You affect other people. And so I went back to California. I was in Washington, D.C. And, I was practicing law at the time. And I knew I had to change. I knew that I didn't have to change for him. I needed to change because I wasn't happy. It was just a big wake up call. I'm going to share one more pivotal moment because I know you're going to want to talk about this, and that was, I thought I was healed. And so we're fast forwarding like 10 years or something, maybe not 10, 5 years. And I thought I was healed. And on some level I was, that I wasn't as obsessive about what I was eating. I was eating more comfortably. I had less rules. I thought more about how I felt instead of how I looked. And I had switched careers. I was helping people. I had a young family, and I was putting so much stress on myself. Like there was just a lot of stress to be an example, to, share to my community, to walk the talk, to make my kids foods from scratch, to eat all the kale quinoa. And I learned about, and I think this was huge for you in the article you read, I learned about what happens when we're thinking stressful thoughts while eating. And these could be true or not. They could be, something like, am I going to feel bloated, or whatever sort of conversation you're having. Or it could be something like, is this, am I showing up as a good example for my community? Am I, is this looking good? Is it, am I doing the right thing?
Do I have the right amount of proteins and carbs and fats and enough greens and all of that stuff? Yeah.
Exactly. So it's these thoughts that we have over and over again that we don't even realize how they're impacting our body. So I learned about the stress response, and in like one sentence, it's basically when you are thinking these stressful thoughts, your body releases cortisol, and you are in what's called a sympathetic state, so that it affects your digestion, your metabolism, your nutrient assimilation, and you don't get as much pleasure from your meal. And it doesn't even matter what you're eating. You can be eating the healthiest food or, whatever you're eating. So that was a huge wake-up call. I feel like that was the moment where I really realized that I had to change not just what was on my plate, but also what was going on in my mind.
I think it's so common for women who are trying to live healthy lifestyles to go out to learn the information and say, okay, well, I'm going to apply the information. But at the same time, be stressed about if they are applying that well enough, if they are abiding by the rules, which that I'm a big proponent of not following all the rules, health rules at least, and then creating all of this shame and guilt and stress surrounding it, even though we're doing things with the right intention. It's like being filtered out by the cortisol. It's being filtered out by the stress. And then all of that work and intentionality that we put into it isn't really even being received because we have all of this food noise, which was another term that I read in the article and also you talk about in the book. And I want to dig into that too, but then I want to go back up to some of those pivotal moments that you just talked about, because I have some follow-up questions with those. But since I talked about food noise, let's go ahead and get into that. If you can kind of explain some what that is, because I think that is really profound as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned it, and in the article that you read, it was just in passing. And I actually read that article today again, and I was thinking how I wonder if when people are reading it, they're going to know what food noise is, because that article doesn't really explain it. It's from a different chapter in my book.
But I knew as soon as you said it, I was like, I know exactly what she's talking about because I've had that.
Mm-hmm. And also because that's probably what you share with your community too. So food noise is, anything that distracts you from listening to your body. That's like the really short definition of it. And what I mean by that is, the articles you read, some of the social media posts that, might make you feel like, oh, I got to try that, or I got to do this, or I'm doing it all wrong. It's advertisements. It's basically diet culture, sharing messages. It's the plan that you need to follow, or, we're bombarded with it. And there's actually no way to get rid of it. Unfortunately, right now, we can reduce it, but we can't get rid of it. It's everywhere. Just think about you when you open up Instagram, it's there, right? Like there's food noise, and you get better when you become aware of it at how you respond to it. But that's what you have. The awareness is first, like, is this taking me away from actually listening to my body? And then the second thing is learning how to reduce it, and how you respond to it too. Because you could say this is food noise and move on, right? Mm-hmm. Or if it's something like you hear about something, let's just say a new food, and you're like, I'm all for being curious, but the difference is when you realize, okay, it might not be good for me. And so you want to make sure you're connected to your body and listening to your body when you hear that, so that you can be curious and not think, oh, this is the end all be all. Because trust me, I've been there where, oh, so-and-so says I should do this.
This is the latest superfood.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, what I think is so interesting is layering, and maybe layering isn't the right word, but integrating the concept of food noise and what we have ping-ponging around in our head, or that running narrative, whatever that might be, and integrating that with our food story. Because, I think it's important to go back and think about the origins of our food story. And, you shared that story about your dad, you've shared some other stuff in the book, and being able to recognize that to bring to the awareness of the food noise. I don't know if that's making sense, but I think it's really, powerful to think of those kind of as hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So that way we can start to make some more positive choices. Now, I will tell you that after I read that article, it struck me to my core. Even as much as I have tried to learn about the mind-body connection, or I am learning, so that's part of the process, right? Is I am learning it. After that day, I have since started, when I sit down to have my lunch, number one, I don't pull my computer out. I don't pull my phone. I put my phone upside down, away, out of arm's length. And then I take 3 deep, like calming breaths. and just kind of reset my body. And then I eat, my lunch. And what I have found is if you define food noise as anything that distracts you from listening to your body, then that drastically reduces my food noise. It
Mm.
keeps me engaged with the food that I'm eating. It helps me to respond to my body's signals. It helps me enjoy it, because I put work into it. I mean, it's not like it's anything fabulous, but anything that I put in front of myself, I enjoy eating. I like the taste of it. So that has just been, I'm telling everyone, I was telling my clients about it yesterday while they were in the middle of a set. And I was like, by the way, let's just try this. And I just think it's really, really interesting.
So you were trying to explain how, like, the messages we receive growing up and food noise, how they're interconnected. And absolutely, because that's what makes up your inner narrative and your belief system about food and just how you relate to food. So you can't really separate it. I agree with you, but it's a helpful exercise to pay attention to where certain beliefs came from,
Yeah.
and that's, but food noise is what you're hearing now too, like it's ongoing, whereas those experiences happened in the past, but they could have completely been so formative in how you relate to food. And so I wanted to comment on that, and I love how you are actually like extracting all the lessons and sharing with everyone now, because it sort of feels like, oh gosh, how am I going to get those voices and that narrative out of my head, or that dialogue, when I've had it for so long? And the good news is that something as simple as taking 3 deep breaths, which you just explained, can help you come to the table much less stressed and much more relaxed. And that is so huge for people, because everybody can do that. And you can do it even if you're at a restaurant eating with other people. You can just take a few deep breaths. And what it does is, that it calms your nervous system. And it just kind of creates that barrier from, everything that's going on, like the stress, the anxiety, the external noise, and helps you come back into your body.
It's really powerful. And, it's one of those things too that I think you just kind of have to trust the system with it, because depending on where people are in their awareness of that connection between what we're thinking, what's in our head and what's going on in our body, it can seem super woo woo, like this is going to be too simple. Like there's no way that, but it really does. It's been super impactful to me, and just forces me to slow down and forces me to like just be aware. And, I'm finding that I eat just a little less because I'm responding to my signals before they get to be like, okay, and now we're done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when they're saying originally, like giving that little tap, tap, hey, we're done, rather than the shove, okay, we're done. So I don't know. It's just, that has been, that is definitely something that I read in your article, and then you delve into a lot more in your book, that was so applicable and so simple to me, but I think really makes a huge difference. So, one of the things I want to talk some about is the structure of this book. I love how you make this super interactive. And, you and I both, I know I did this. I'm assuming you did something like this, but I remember like being in third grade on the playground and pulling out the Mad Libs
Oh, yeah.
and filling things out. And you have a few places in here where we reflect on our former food story. And then later on at the end, we create a new food story. And it's kind of like that. But to me,
But more sophisticated, I think, right?
significantly
And
more
not funny
sophisticated. No,
necessarily.
no, it's not. And I don't mean to lighten it, but what I like is that it's guided. Because if someone were to say, well, what's your food story?
Exactly.
You might have to kind of think about that, but you walk us through the experiences that we've had, and you walk us through the thoughts that we may have had, and are able to more easily identify some of that. So I love the resources that you have in there. What caused you, or what led you to include that?
So you mean the Mad Lib style? So it's it's exactly what you said. Like, how do you write out your food story? Like that's so much, and tell me about your food story, it would be themes or something. So I think that when you recognize a part of your food story, then it opens up the memories and the doorway to reflect on other parts of your story. And so I just wanted to be able to set it in motion for people. It's almost like action inspires action too. So when you're like, this is a theme, or this is how it was, but this is how I want it to be, and then there's nothing preventing you from thinking deeper and further, but you have to have a starting place. I wanted to give people a place to start, you can't just stare at a blank page. It just doesn't, it's not, as inspiring or as easy. And oftentimes there's shame or there's guilt or there's, like uncomfortableness with our story. And so when you're like, okay, I'm just going to fill in these blanks and start thinking about my story, it's a lot easier and more accessible for people. So that's where it came from. And it's not so Mad Libby, but I know what you're saying. So,
Well, I hope that doesn't offend you that I say
no,
Mad Libby.
no, but
or Mad Libs.
I felt funny about it too, when I first came up with it, but people, you just need a place to start, because a lot of the readers and probably your clients have never really thought about their food story.
Yeah.
So here it is, tell us a little bit and you'll start thinking of a lot of it.
Well, I think one thing it does is it guides you with thinking about it. It gives you permission to acknowledge things. And one of the things that I've learned in learning about just how story work, like I have a friend who's a counselor in terms of just story work in general and how stories of our past affect how we are today and how we relate to things today, and our emotional health and all of that. And the other thing that I think that's really nice about it is it's a place for us to say, this is what happened, but not place guilt or shame on, maybe people around us who, like when you were talking about your dad, who was simply trying to protect himself.
Yeah.
From the food in the refrigerator. I mean, understandably so, but being able to say, this is how it was, and not say, shame on you, dad. It was just like, this is how it is. And that I think can help the healing process from that too. And that can help us adjust when we accept the facts of how of our story and of how we have related to food in the past. So I think it was a really great exercise. And they're not all like that. I mean, as you know, but there are other places where we can fill in some blanks and some journalings and, my plan to eliminate food noise. I mean, my plan is to take 3 deep breaths and to
That's
put
good.
down.
But I wanted to add on to something you said, how like almost like forgive your past is sort of what you were saying. I know that it's very healing to be able to connect the dots. And sometimes though, things happen in a divorce, someone unintentionally like making a comment about you that turned into, some sort of like, it triggered a habit that, or a pattern that you're trying to release now. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that most, like your parents, especially your caregivers, whatever, were well-intentioned. And sometimes like things happen and now we have different languaging and we would never say that, or, it's just, and to be able to say this happened, but it wasn't out of a bad, there wasn't ill will. And if there were things that happened that you need to forgive your past, that's also important, because everything's energy. It gets stuck inside you, and just writing it out helps release some of those stored up emotions. You can say, okay, this is no longer true for me now, or this isn't serving me. So the actual physical act of writing can do wonders for what has been pent up inside of you for so long.
That's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. I like how you say forgive your past, and you're right. We do have more language. I mean, that can be said in so many different social circumstances that we have better language now. And I think that we definitely are learning that, maybe some of the things that were hurtful that weren't meant to be hurtful um, actually were. And so we're changing that. But, like you said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. I think it's important for us to hold that as we walk through this, because, we're in charge of our own healing. We're in charge of creating our new food story, of creating, a more positive relationship with food and all of that. So yeah, I love how you say that. Okay, so let's talk some about the stress response. You touched on that at the very beginning, and I think that was really impactful. Do you mind if I read a couple things from the book to you? Does this
No, I love it. I love it.
When I read books, I underline things. And then when I find something that I really like, I put an arrow to it in the margins. And I have a lot of arrows in the book Food Story. I mean, it's really, really interesting. But like what you talk about, with your sympathetic nervous system. So that is your fight or flight. When you get stressed out, it directs the body to produce more cortisol, a stress hormone. Your muscles tense, your heart starts beating fast, your blood pressure rises, your blood sugar goes up, your appetite increases, especially for sugary, high carb foods. So when we're sitting down and we're rushing through our lunch in the middle of the day because we had one thing and then we've got something else and we just have a little bit of time, that is, I mean, it might be that that's the only time that we have to eat, but I mean, just thinking about how that all impacts our body, I don't know. It's just, like I said, it's really mind blowing about how it impacts. And I want to go on here. It says over time, all of this stress doesn't just hamper the digestive system. It can seriously damage it, weakening the lining of your gut, increasing its permeability, common referred to as leaky gut, and harming your microbiome, the collection of bacteria that help break down food. One of the most popular episodes that I've had on here is talking about the gut microbiome. So I know my community is really interested in this. So talk to us some about how we can become a more, you use the term, relaxed eater and just chill out when we sit down and eat.
Well, you touched on one of the simplest ways, and that is just to try before you eat, when you sit down, to take those 3 deep breaths. And I can't stress enough, and I guess stress is a bad word to use here, but reinforce this idea, because when something is hard, then we don't run to do it. But when something is so easy and simple and it's available, then we'll do it. So like you said, it has been so impactful for you to just begin as many meals as possible with 3 deep breaths. So that's one of the first ones. I want to also back up that it's really important to notice your thoughts, because that's, you have to have that awareness. And so many of us have that running conversation, that inner dialogue, that it's a soundtrack almost. And you don't even realize that you're thinking those thoughts. So just notice what's going on inside your head. Are you getting to the table thinking, should I be eating this? Oh no, I heard X is not good for you. I thought it was, whatever. Is this going to make me feel bloated? And just notice whether you're having these like self-imposed stressful thoughts. If you are, you've likely had them for a long time, and so they're like part of your meal. So noticing it, not judging yourself, because that would make the stress even worse, but just noticing, like, just out of curiosity, what am I thinking when I sit down? Am I counting? Am I like not even realizing I'm calculating? And so that's huge. And because you can't really change what you don't know. So noticing and that awareness, the taking the 3 deep breaths. There's a lot of science with mantras. They're not for everybody. Some people feel like it's too woo-woo and they can't do it, or it doesn't work for them. But, I went through a time where I was more into mantras, and, now I know how to leave the stress away from the table. So a mantra could be something like, I am nourishing my body. It could just be like, relax, enjoy. It could be one word, anything that's kind of a reminder that you repeat over and over again, so that you can't have those stressful thoughts. You're just like coming back into your body with your mantra. So a mantra and 3 deep breaths. You kind of have to decide what feels good and right and works for you, but those are a few options. And then the last thing I'm going to mention, and you've brought it up, is the multitasking while eating. And we are a culture of distracted eaters. I mean, I talk about this in the book actually, and this was mind blowing. The statistics of how many people eat with their phone. Mm-hmm. They can't put their phone away. And trust me, I've been guilty of this. I'm not perfect with it, but I do try to do what you shared, where I go plug it in arm's length away, or even in the other room, and I turn it upside down so that I can't see those notifications or whatever. And I really do try. And that doesn't mean you have to spread the white tablecloth out and spend, an hour slow eating like the Europeans do. But it's just giving yourself 5-10 minutes even of undistracted eating. I know that's really hard for people, but it's unbelievable the difference it makes when you notice the food in front of you, when you taste it, when you bring all your senses to the table. It makes such a huge difference in the way that your body responds to the food, and also the satisfaction and pleasure you have from your meal. The multitasking thing is just, it's actually a myth, because our brains can't we think we're, especially women, we think we're such good multitaskers. And on some level, we probably are. But at the end of the day, it just makes you feel overwhelmed and not present with either things, because our brain can't process both or all three things, whatever you're doing at one time. So that's huge. I call it single tasking. There's some book that came out about monotasking. I think it's called monotasking. So whatever you want to call it, it is, it's funny because a lot of people have asked me about this, Amy, and I was thinking about it, how we eat right? We eat and run out the door. We eat and answer emails. We eat and look at our phone. We eat and watch TV. We'll eat and fill in the blank. There's an and. And so I want to cross out that and say just eat.
Yeah, I love that. We do eat and. I mean, I will say, if I could be totally honest, the one thing that's hard for me is because I work from home and I'm home alone 3 days a week, it feels a little lonely. And I think that that's one reason why maybe we do eat because then we don't feel as lonely, because we have Apple News feeding us. Feeding is probably not the right word, but shooting, whatever the news headlines is, or Twitter or something like that. And I'm just wondering if maybe that's, I don't think that that's something we need to run from, but I wonder if that's a barrier that people have.
No, I'm trying to remember where I almost had this identical conversation with someone who was interviewing me, said the same thing. It's very hard. I don't want to be inside. Oh, I remember now. I don't want to be in silence with myself. And I understand that. So maybe you can pay attention to what you're consuming, not the food I'm talking about, but the television, the news, because if you're consuming, stressful news, that's going to make a difference. But if you're listening to music that's more peaceful, or if you're watching something that the news is pretty stressful these days, that isn't going to, spike your cortisol and stress you out, maybe that's your happy medium. Or you try doing the beginning of your meal without the distractions. And then after you've kind of settled in and connected to your body, then you can find something. So I agree, there's no one right way for everybody, but at least becoming aware of how you're letting all that outside noise affect you is huge, and so I understand though that it could feel weird to not have anything else going on. You're not a monk, eating in silence. So but I think it's important to have those eating experiences so you can notice the difference. And in my book, and this is also something I love to do when we had live events, I share a chocolate meditation. And it's really just an exaggerated exercise where you learn to bring all your senses to the table. And so if you can give yourself that kind of experience so you can know the difference and find that happy medium, that closer to being present, then I think that's the way to approach it.
Well, and I feel like too, for me, a lot of it is, like I always will translate stories into like fitness and stuff like that. So sometimes you have to just take more time and effort when you're getting into a new fitness routine, or you're, starting to move your body in a different way because it's not as efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that maybe for me right now, it's worth the time to just put everything away, because like you said, I'm relearning how to be with myself in silence. And then maybe I'll get to a point where I can add some more things on. But for me right now, I think it's a good reset
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, rather than sitting down and being inundated by all of the other things, I'm allowing myself to respond to my body. I'm allowing myself to notice that when I'm not hungry anymore, or enjoy the taste of the food, or the if it's crunchy or salty or whatever. So I like to hear you say, Elise, that it's something that we can kind of adjust to what works for us. And I would add to that, and that can change over time, but depending on what you're needing and what you feel like you need to focus on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And that's why you have to be connected enough to yourself to know what works
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. Okay. So you brought up the chocolate meditation. My community knows that I love chocolate, and I especially love Dove chocolate. So I actually sat down last week and did this chocolate meditation,
I
and
love
it
it.
blew my mind. It was crazy. First of all, like, what? Dove chocolate does have a smell. Like, I've never taken the time to actually inhale and enjoy the smell of it. And it was so powerful that it almost made me like not feel like I wanted the whole square. But
No,
I, of course,
I understand that because it makes it so much more satisfying and you're just
yeah.
noticing all the nuances. It's such a great exercise. It's so
Yes.
good. Maybe you could do it with, at some point
I
we
I
could.
think I will. You know what I'll do is I will do this. This is coming out on a Tuesday. So on Friday, we will do a chocolate meditation together. I'll put that out on my Graced Health community. So if you haven't joined yet, listeners, make sure that you join, and we will go over there and do a chocolate meditation together. But that was really powerful. And of course, I love chocolate so much.
Me too. Me too. Well, as you mentioned, I used to be killing chocolate. So
That's right.
there's a
That's
history
right.
with chocolate.
Yes, absolutely. If someone was asking you about this book, about food story, about food noise, I mean, there's so much more that you cover in the book. We didn't even get to like the different ways that foods can make you feel. I mean, I think
Mm.
you identify 6 different ways. You know, happy, focused, sensual, different ways that food can make us feel. So I mean, you cover that, you cover it all. What would be the one thing that you would hope that your readers would walk away from after they've read Food Story?
Mm. That's such a good question. Well, I feel like so many people live with angst, anxiety, confusion, stress about food, and food is our friend. It's nourishing, it's connection, it's pleasure. You like, like, there's so much, it can do so many wonderful things, like you were talking about with, in the mood boosting foods. It can do so many incredible things for you. And so I want the reader to know that they can experience all of that with food, and that there is a way out of all the, like, the unwanted health and eating challenges, and, like, any sort of negative emotions that you feel around food, and that it is possible to find peace with food.
Yeah, it is, and it's a journey, but I think it's definitely one worth taking for sure. Well, thank you for writing that. Okay, I have one more question. This is something I ask all my guests.
Okay.
You already know
Wait.
what it's coming. You know what it's coming. But if there's someone new listening, I'm going to go ahead and say it. So I am fascinated by tattoos. I don't have any, but what I found is when people choose often, not all the time, but people will choose to put body art on their body for the rest of their lives. There's sometimes a meaningful story behind it. So I was wondering if you had a tattoo, if you would mind sharing what it is and what it means to you. And if you didn't have one, what would it be and where would it go?
Well, I'm curious to explore your tattoo story at some point, since you have a fascination with it and you don't have one. I do not have tattoos. So this is a brand new question. Nobody's ever asked me it. And, you know, I, you would think it would be food, but I'm stuck between two and they're going to sound sort of the same. One, I don't know if this is very cool, but would be the sun or like a sunflower. I love, so the sunflower I'll tell you, I think the sunflower is going to win and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because it's my happy flower. It's like an instant mood boost. We can do things throughout the day that make us feel really good. So I think looking down on a tattoo with a sunflower would do that for me. I love yellow. And if any of your listeners get the book, they'll see that the cover is yellow.
A beautiful, bright yellow.
Yeah. Yes. And that's another, it makes you feel vibrant and bright. And also, flowers, they don't bloom all year round. We always think that, we need to be on, and my story of perfection, which we didn't really get into, but, that was just a lot of pressure that I had to be on all the time. And I feel like if I could take lessons from nature and flowers, that we go through cycles of life, and, that we're not always like bright and vibrant all the time. And that's okay. We're human, and, the flowers have a lot to teach us. So I think that would be my tattoo. And I'm not sure where I would put it, but as I'm speaking, I'm like, well, if it was in my wrist, I would see it a lot, especially since I talk with my hands.
I love that. And what a great reminder too. The flowers do go through cycles. They go through seasons, and there are times for us to be on and vibrant. And then there are times for us to, maybe retreat or be quiet or listen or tune in and nurture ourselves. And then we can nurture other people. So I love that example. I think that's just fantastic.
Okay, great. But I think I'll do a temporary tattoo before I do a real one, just to play with it. But thanks for making me contemplate a question that I hadn't really thought about.
You're welcome. I know I hear a lot is, well, I've never been asked that one before. So.
Exactly.
Okay. How can people connect with you? Because I'm hoping that everyone will go out, especially if you have read Your Worthy Body. This is such a fabulous compliment, and it really digs deeper into the nutritional aspect, deeper into the food stuff. I wish we could bundle it up and sell it together, because I think it's so good.
Yeah, well, they are definitely complimentary. I haven't finished your book yet, but I'm excited about it. People can find me. My website is my name, elisemuseles.com. I am on social media now as my name, Elise Museles. So you can find me on all the platforms, but Instagram is definitely the baby. And my book is sold wherever books are sold. If you want to, ask your local bookstore if they don't have it, or just find it on, on the internet. And I also have a podcast called Once Upon a Food Story, which I love because I really can share my guest stories and dig deeper into people's stories, which is what connects us all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's nothing that connects us more than understanding someone's story or hearing it. And then all of a sudden, what seems maybe strange, or, there's all the words that all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay. That's great. Well, thank you for coming on, Elise. I have been really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm so grateful for you and what you're doing and sharing your story within Food Story. And I'm really hoping that everybody goes out and gets this book. It is well worth it. Highly, highly recommend. And I will be shouting it from everywhere because I think it's so powerful.
Well, I'm hiring you for PR, but thank you, Amy, for everything that you do and for holding the space for, for people. And just, I'm glad to know you. And I'm so happy that you reached out after reading that article. So now we are connected.
Okay, as we mentioned, if you read my book, Your Worthy Body, Elise's book, Food Story, is an incredible complement to the message of changing our mindset about food and how it's so much more than nutrients and calories and what we eat and when we eat and all of that kind of stuff. I cannot recommend this book enough. There are so many elements we actually didn't get a chance to talk about. I almost want to bring her back on, but Elise has all kinds of recipes in the back to help you feel particular ways that you are wanting to feel. And she has this black bean and beet burger recipe, which, depending on what you think about black beans and beets, might sound strange. I'm telling you, it is outstanding. Outstanding. Anytime I make this in the future, I'm doubling the recipe because it was so good. We will have the Amazon link to this book in the show notes. And of course, you can also grab it wherever else you buy books, especially if you like those independent booksellers, go grab them there. And if you are listening to this real time, like on the day it releases or within a couple days close to it, I want you, this is your formal invitation to join me in the Graced Health Community Facebook group on Friday, February 18th at 1 p.m. Central Time. And I am going to lead you through the chocolate meditation we talked about. How wonderful does that sound? So this is all Elise's brain power, and I am just going to be sharing it with you because it was really impactful to me, and I think you will love it. So go to the Graced Health Community Facebook group. The link is in the show notes to join us. It's all free. So just head on over there and join us. You get to have a chocolate meditation, compliments of Elise Museles. Hey, if you found value in today's show, here are 3 simple things that would be super valuable to me. And I know you hear this all the time, and you hear this from me and other podcasters, and that's because it's true. We're not just like deciding to say things. Like, this kind of thing is really, really helpful. So number 1, you can rate and review this podcast. I know it's confusing, especially on Apple, which is why I have a link in the show notes. Just click it and you can go leave a review. Super, super simple. Number 2, sign up to receive my monthly journals. These, again, are free. It's a subscriber only space for me to share things I love, and I think you will too. So sometimes it's movements, sometimes it's food or music or just little things to think about, books. A lot of times I include that. Since it's subscriber only, it's not found on the web, and I get to be as snarky or sassy or serious or however I am feeling and share pictures and experiences that I don't really want to put on the internet. So that's a fun place for me to go. And people seem to really enjoy it as well. Number 3, you can purchase a copy of my book, Your Worthy Body. Like I said, this is not a diet book. It is a cross-cultural, grace-filled look at how to change our mindset about our body, eating, and movement. It's all done through a lens of faith. And if you already have a copy and you're wanting to support, then buy a copy for a friend, get one for a sister, get one for one of your Bible study friends, however it is, so we can bless this and we can start getting this message out more. Each episode, I try to leave you with one simple thing, one little takeaway from our conversation. And with this one, there are so many things I want to pull out, but I think where we'll go is before you eat, take a few breaths to calm yourself and be aware of the food noise surrounding the time with your meal. Like Elise said, sometimes just acknowledging it will help, and it's the first step in rewriting that new food story if you need one. And if you need a little assistance with that or to help improve your relationship with food, go grab a copy of Food Story and Elise will walk you through it in the more sophisticated Mad Libs fashion. Okay, that is all for today. Go out there and have a graced day.